What is up, everybody? It is Kobaz back again with another gameplay plus commentary video. Hopefully you find this useful. I'm going to get tips and tricks all throughout the video, just different things to look out for different bosses, different trash packs, thoughts about our routing, all kinds of stuff like that. This is from a 27 Atal'Dazar that we just did last night. And since it is tyrannical, we are going to go straight into the boss here so that we can get that hero on cooldown as quick as possible. And then just to get some extra percent and save some time, we pull the toxic Sarad packs into this, because they're not going to kill us, especially not with hero going. We're going to have all of our cooldowns up. They're just going to die passively, especially when you have a BM hunter in the group with so much passive cleave just for popping your single target cooldowns. So as you see, they're jumping around, but especially as the first couple of sets die off, there's not really much to worry about when it comes to them. We do pull a reanimated raptor as well, mainly just for extra funnel. We do have an enhancement shaman in here, so extra targets around your main target do increase their single target damage as well. And really this boss is very simple, and it's tyrannical, so it's a little bit like a target dummy. Main things to look out for is if you walk over one of those purple puddles, or if the boss does, you're going to spawn a raptor. So right here, we try to position him such that when he fixates me, I can walk him just to the side of that puddle and we don't get a raptor spawn, which we do barely do. If he does spawn one, it's not the end of the world. The main reason we don't want one right now is because the tank and healer are going to the opposite side of the room and pulling these sky screamers into the boss, because again, it's just extra percent you can do while killing the boss. And as long as you get kicks on these guys, they're not dangerous at all. And since we have a warlock, putting the curse up, it only takes 2 people just to make sure you get every kick. I am still watching the kicks just to make sure that they don't go off, because if we get feared, it is not ideal. And that is also the main reason that when I was fixated, I didn't just feign death, is because we did want the boss to move to this side of the room, because this is where we're going to pull the sky screamers. And you can see right there, I'm watching as the for the backup kick, since the boss is far away. Yep, so one of the mechanics to look out for is don't be stepping on those purple puddles. Don't let the boss step on those purple puddles. And then the only other 2 that you have to worry about are the pursuit and the terrifying visage that's coming out right here. So whenever the boss is doing that terrifying roar, all you have to do is line of sight, otherwise you get feared. And then the other mechanic is the one that's happening right here, which is the pursuit. And the boss is just going to target one person in the group, and it's going to slowly walk at them. If he gets close enough to that one person, then he eats them. They take a ton of damage, and on any respectable key level, they're just going to die. A couple of things to talk about when it comes to the pursuit is if you have an ability like Vanish or Feign Death, then you can just feign and the pursuit ends. You don't have to wait for him to start the channel. You can do it the second he fixates you. And this does not work for Feign, sadly, but if you have Shadow Melds in your group, for some reason, even if the pursuit is on someone else, if you Shadow Meld, it will drop the pursuit on that other person. So for us going into this boss, we know that anytime it goes on me, I'm just going to feign it, unless we're specifically going to use that time to reposition the boss, like in the opener. And if it goes on certain other people, like the enhancement shaman, then we're just going to use a meld to stop that for him, since he's a Draenei and he can't meld for himself. And that's about it for this boss. It's, like I said, it's a target dummy. It's one of the reasons that Atal'Dazar is one of the easier keys to do at higher levels. But pretty clean, didn't have to use any reses, got 8% while doing the boss. Nice and simple. When you get up to the top here, this is the way we came in. You have 2 choices. You can either go left or right. I think left is always better. The packs are a little more dangerous, but if you do them correctly, they're more efficient, I think. And so one of the main things on these packs is just make sure that you're getting the kicks. If the Mantle of Blumsandi cast goes off, there's a big field around the ads that make them immune to kicks and CC. And so if that goes off, you're in a really, really bad spot. And that's why I do track the Mantle cast cooldown there. And then another thing you can do is if your whole group stacks up except for one person, the Juggernaut charge is always going to go to the person that's out of the group. And so right here, you can see that as a BM hunter, I can do my full rotation while moving. And so I'm just moving back and forth. I'm tracking their cooldowns, and I can see that they're about to jump. So I move, and I move. That one, I did get hit by, unfortunate. But since it's not fortified, it's not a one-shot. If you're playing like marksmanship, or you know, you're maybe kiting spitefuls, and you can't continue to kite in such a way that the Juggernaut charge will be avoidable, you can always just pop a binding shot down. It's a lot like the Berserkers in Everbloom. If you put the binding down, when they dash, they do get stunned mid-dash, and while they do complete the dash, they don't do the damage at the end, which I did do during that pack as well. And right here, each person is assigning themselves to... Yep, so right there, I did a binding shot. It stuns itself. I didn't have to worry about it. Each person is assigning themselves to watch a certain mob to make sure that their important casts don't go off. Comes another dash. I see it coming, I dodge. I'm just a fill in these, essentially. So if I see a kick that's going off, like right there, I just take care of it. But I'm not actually assigned, or I haven't assigned myself to any here. During this current week with incorporeal, hunters are very, very good. You can see that anytime incorp is spawning, I just put a trap down preemptively. There's no reason not to. The only thing that you have to be aware of is making sure that your group does not rely on you if the incorporeal is spawning near other mobs, because trap genuinely seems to deprioritize incorporeal. If there is another thing even close to it, but still within your trap radius, it seems to 100% of the time not get the incorporeal. So especially on bosses that have bigger hitboxes, incorporeal is going to spawn too close. Make sure that you do have backups, which we'll see a couple of times throughout this dungeon, I think. But other than that, this week is a really good push week. Obviously, fortified is going to be better most of the time for pushing. But with the way the scoring system works, you do need high tyrannical and fortified keys. And as far as tyrannical weeks go, this is pretty free. Spiteful, very, very easy to manage, especially as a ranged character. And then incorporeal is just a CC check. It's that simple. But like right there, I just communicate with my team like, hey, just CC this one for me. It's kind of close to these mobs. I'm not going to waste the global on a trap that's maybe going to cause a problem. It might not, but we're just playing it safe. This section is a little bit difficult CC. When you're not tanking the mobs in the far corner. The dash is pretty quick, and so I did communicate with my tank there, just, hey, can you pull them further out? Because there are mobs at the top of the stairs, and so if you move back to the top of the stairs to dodge these, to get the extra range to dodge these dashes, then you might accidentally face pull, and that is no good. So I just tell my tank, hey, can we pull him into the corner? It'll be safer for me. And then right there, like I'm talking about, it's easy to just toss a trap down, and then your group knows that the one that isn't instantly trapped, as far as the incorporeals go, is going to be the one that they need to CC. Because the trap should be literally instant. It should be sitting there waiting for them to spawn. Another thing to note on these packs is the Colossus. They have a channeled ability where there will be two like teal beams. You can just feign it if it ever targets you. It's not an issue at all. You can and should be purging the Juggernauts when they get the Rage cast off, and the Colossus. Every time a troll dies near that Colossus, it gets a magic stacking buff that just, it's essentially bolstering for that mob. You can also trank shot that. You do have to stay on top of those trank shots because it stacks, and if it's up to 5 stacks, it'll take 5 trank shots to get it off. It doesn't just do the whole stack, which is a bit of a pain. When possible, make sure that you time your cooldowns such that you do have cooldowns for this pack. It is a really big pack and it can be dangerous. Ideally, you would be targeting the one that does the transfusion here. I have been working on my UI for the last couple of days, and as you can see, nameplates are not ideal as far as stacking goes. So right here, I just decided to burn down an auger because I'm still doing a lot of cleave damage to the prio target, and it would take me way too long to just cycle through all those to find the correct target, which, terrible excuse, but when you're working on your UI and then your team is like, hey, let's do keys. Well, you give me like 2 hours, like that doesn't really work. And a great way to test your UI is to just go into content and see like, okay, I need to fix this. I need to fix this. This was not good, that dungeon. I need to fix that, right? And that's another thing that you'll notice throughout this dungeon is I got a weak aura that tracks the cooldowns of mobs' special abilities. And so you can see next to the juggernauts, it tracks their dash. Next to the augur, it tracks the wildfire, right? By default, that weak aura tracks so many useless things, and it's just visual clutter. And that is one thing that you really want to avoid when you're setting up your UI is visual clutter, especially when half the time what's going to be in that position is important and half the time it's clutter, because you want to be able to train your eyes to just quickly glance just real quick to a certain spot on your screen for important information, right? And you don't want it to be half clutter, half good information, because you want to just very quickly be able to identify, like, okay, I glance here, I'm looking for something specific. It should just be a glance. And the way that this weak aura is set up right now, since I haven't gone through and trimmed it, it takes more than a glance, because I'm looking at the cooldowns that are displayed. And as you saw, like on the first poll, those little saurids, their jumps are being tracked, and they go off every 3 seconds per mob, and there are like 10 mobs. It's a complete waste of screen space and brain power to just have all those icons ticking on your screen. As far as this boss goes, it's super simple. Make sure that you're trank shotting on the Gilded Claws. Make sure that you're swapping to the ads when the boss is healthy enough that you know you can't just CC them for the rest of the fight. So like right here, the boss is low enough that we've decided to just keep these ads CC'd. I'm trapping first because it's a ground effect. And then the following person has a targeted spell. Whereas if we started with a targeted spell, then when I try to trap, it very likely could overlap. Right there, I communicate that I can't trap that incorporeal, so my team gets it. Other than that, the only thing you have to worry about on this boss is the transfusion. It does a lot of damage. Make sure that you step into that blood pool as late as possible, because the blood pool also does damage. And so if you step into it early and you have that debuff for longer than you need, then you're already going to be low. And then the boss is also going to start sucking the blood out of you, and it can kill you very quickly. This is a 27 tyrannical, and so I just know that I'm going to be rotating through cooldowns for the entirety of that boss. Every time there's a transfusion, I'm either using my Fortitude of the Bear plus an Exil, I'm using my wall, or I'm using my turtle. Fortitude of the Bear isn't a damage reduction, but it does synergize really well with your heal. So make sure that you're using those together whenever possible, especially for damage that isn't one big hit. And try not to overlap those with your wall or your turtle. These packs are super simple. You just get a couple of kicks. If your tank stands in the mobs, they actually stop casting for some of these. It's really strangely coded. I could not tell you how that works, but it makes the trash pulls really easy. Whenever you have Sky Screamers, try to do as much with them as possible. Like you can see here, we're doing, we pulled previous trash pack into this. We're doing the swords with it. We're getting extra Sky Screamers as stuff falls off just to save time. Atal'Dazar is a super lenient dungeon. You don't really have to save that much time, but assuming that you know and you're confident in your group that you'll be able to get these kicks, there's no reason not to do this. Like it's 1 kick per mob on a pretty high cooldown. Like you can see right there, it's like a 17-second cooldown for this. If you have 2 melee in your group, they can take care of the kicks completely on these guys. So realistically, we should probably be pulling this Sky Screamer with the next one, just to save time. But like I said, in Atal'Dazar, it's not really necessary. And then, you know, more boring Atal'Dazar packs. And you can see right here, this is what I was talking about with the visual clutter on that weak aura. You can see next to each Saurid, it's showing the cooldown of their jump. It starts flashing whenever it's getting close to being off cooldown. And you don't want that. The only information that you want on your screen is information that you need. If you don't want it, find it, identify it, get rid of it. Because visual clutter is a very real thing, especially nowadays when weak auras are so prevalent and people like to download packs. The packs by default have everything, and I mean everything. They track the most useless spells in a lot of cases. So whenever you get one of these packs, like the dungeon timer packs, or this one that shows cooldowns on nameplates, just go through it. and trim it like right when you get it. It takes a while, it's a pain, but I think on their own this might not be the case, but as you get more of them, they start to actively hurt more than they help. And you can see right there, the shade was close to the incorporeal. I try to trap it, it prioritizes the shade. Just like I was mentioning earlier, it's always going to hit the other mob, not the incorporeal. So I quickly kick, I communicate to my team, hey, this trap isn't going to work out, somebody get it. But as I was saying, these weak aura packs can be very, very strong. But as you get, you know, 2 or 3 of them, and you haven't trimmed them out to get rid of all of that unnecessary information, it just becomes so much shit on your screen that you can't even play the game. So just make sure that when you are getting these, you ideally get them one at a time, and you trim them down as you get them. And a really good way to do that is to just record yourself, because in the moment, you're obviously not going to be trimming it mid-dungeon, but it can also be hard to identify what you do and don't want to see at the start of a dungeon before you've actually done it. So if you actually record yourself, go back and you can just, as you see things like, okay, I don't need that, trim it in real time. Okay, I don't need that, trim it in real time as you go through. So like right there, you can see that I do track something that's not going to kill me, which is the bulwark. A lot of the times I would say, don't track that. But the bulwark, when you know it's coming, you can hold damage until it gets disrupted, so you don't waste a kill command into a big damage reduction. Right here, since we don't have a rogue and we don't want to invis skip, we're doing a very old school hunter skip. There are certain CCs that, while the mob is in CC, it will still aggro to whoever walks by it, right? So trap, it'll still aggro. Paralyze, it'll still aggro. Stuff like that, it'll still aggro. And so what we do there is I trap it, we use ROP to move it, and then I walk by first so that I get aggro. And then since it's fixated on me, my whole team can walk through without getting in combat with that mob. And then once my whole team is through, then I feign death, we drop combat, and when that CC falls off, the mob will just reset, no problem. We could have just used the Demon Hunter Imprison, but he had to use it on, I think, a Spiteful down below is what he used it on, but it was on cooldown, so we just used the Hunter skip instead. Imprison, if you use it, you shouldn't get aggro, even if you walk by it. This boss, super simple. The first phase here is just make sure you're kicking the boss whenever he's doing the noxious stench, and then make sure you kill these totems close to the same time while still avoiding the jump from the boss. You do have a little bit of time, like when you kill a totem, it'll start a cast, and then if it finishes that cast before the other totems die, then they all res. So I think it's 6.5, 7 seconds that you have to kill them all within the first one getting hit. And then you enter phase 2 when those all die. This one, the tank is just going to bring the boss around the room, around the perimeter. Range are just filling in the center with these green puddles. They come out roughly every 1.5 seconds. So as a BM hunter, you can just be thinking a little bit mentally, and it can be a bit much just to constantly throughout the fight be thinking and stutter stepping at the right interval. But you can completely avoid them if you're thinking ahead and it's like, okay, it's gonna come out now, you move. Like right there, sadly the healer did not move, and it will kill you, or it can kill you if you sit in it for too long. So this is a really good example of Flutter from one of those weak aura packs that I downloaded. I'm already tracking the boss's cast in my boss bars. You can see it right there. In Bigwigs, I raid lead for my Mythic guild, so I'm very used to paying attention to boss bars. I know that when I'm tracking abilities that show up in boss bars in Bigwigs or DPM, I know where it's going to show, and I know to just glance right there, and my brain processes it really quickly because I'm used to it. Some people don't have that same habit, and so they like having a weak aura in the middle of their screen that counts down to it, and then also a weak aura that's saying in your ear every 20 seconds, interrupt, interrupt, interrupt. It's awful. So after this dungeon, I went through and I got rid of both of those because I was like, I don't need this. I don't need 3 different things telling me, okay, you need to interrupt, you need to interrupt, you need to interrupt all at the same time. Just pick the one that works best for you, keep that one, get rid of the other ones. But other than that, that's all there is to this boss. It's just move around the room, don't die, dodge circles, kick the boss. Super simple. It's another target dummy. style of boss that I was mentioning, kind of like Rezan. And another reason why Atal'Dazar is one of the dungeons that is completed at a high level most frequently. It's kind of crazy how the tuning is different in some of these dungeons. Like Blackrock Hold and Atal'Dazar are relatively so free compared to so many other dungeons. It's insane. And then they also just have really lenient timers. I think Galakron's Fall has the most lenient timer, but this one also has a really lenient timer. And I think on its own, that wouldn't be so bad. Like, you can really easily just balance the keys around that. But with AUG existing, I think the timers need to be tighter, frankly. Because right now, AUG is just dominating the meta. And the reason is, so many of these dungeons, you're either going to be able to complete it or not based on surviving bosses, especially on tyrannical. It's not going to come down to the timer. So like right here, you can see this is a 27 and we have 9 minutes going into the last boss. It hasn't been like a perfect run. It's been pretty clean. And we do have high damage, but like almost 10 minutes going into the last boss on a 27, it's so lenient. And what that means is you can deprioritize damage to take things that are tankier or that make the rest of your group tankier. And so AUG is just so valuable in so many of these keys because it's not going to come down to the timer. Sure, they're not worth quite as much as a third DPS, but the fact that they make it so you can live through all of this stuff without really thinking about it is, I think it's a problem. And I think that AUG, either the damage that they give needs to be nerfed, or dungeons need to have tighter timers so that there's actually pros and cons to bringing in AUG. It's not just, okay, AUG is best. You just want an AUG, period, because they keep you alive. It should be a thought process of, okay, we can take the AUG and we won't die, but then damage is going to be tight and we're going to have to race against this timer and do riskier pulls. So you need that survivability. Or you take the DPS, you're able to pull a little bit more conservatively because you have the damage too. But then you might die the bosses. So like right here, you can see anytime any mechanic is going to hit me, I pretty much need a defensive. Racking Pain, I did test on a 26 to find out if I could survive it on the 27, and I can without it popping anything. But if that's followed by any more damage, or if I don't get healed, like the global after, the dot will kill me. So just make sure, especially when there's a soul rend shortly after a Racking Pain, that you're using something, because you will die otherwise. The name of the game on this boss is baiting the spiders that are in the center of the room correctly. There are two things that you need to watch out for, and that's making sure that you group up here every time a soul rend is coming out, and making sure that spiders are handled. The way the spiders work is they do spawn just periodically throughout the fight, and then also periodically throughout the fight you'll see they get big, and then they run towards people. And so as ranged, what you want to do is you want to either be directly on the boss, so you're with melee, or you want to be on the exact outside of the room, like walking the perimeter a little bit behind the boss, so that you're always having the spiders follow you around the room. And then that way, it doesn't get that dangerous unless they spawn ahead of you, like here. So right here, what we should do is a big move. We should just run to the clear spot, but this is going to be a little bit sketchy, you'll see, since we didn't run. Those are going to come out. Thankfully, the spider fixate ended. But depending on the timing, like right here, it gets really sketchy, and I'm surprised nobody died right there because we didn't do the big move to get away from the spiders. But yeah, just run the boss in a circle around the room. Make sure we're baiting spiders correctly. Never be ahead of the boss. Never ever be ahead of the boss, because if I'm ahead of the boss here, I'm going to be baiting spiders directly into our path, and it can just cause a wipe so quickly. So always either be directly on the boss with melee, or you can see my warlock out there walking the edge of the room. The reason I'm in melee is because I'm a BM hunter and I can just freely move with with no worries, right? But as a caster, you will want to be thinking about it and baiting behind the boss so that you can actually sit and cast for a second before having to move constantly. When your cooldowns come up, it is ideal to use them so that they overlap with the cleave. The ads that spawn, the soul rend, you stack up, and right here I'm just getting a kick because trap takes a while to travel. So I kick the destabilize first so that the trap has time to run. And another thing that's really useful here is you can walk around these stairs and then range can use that part of the room. I did try right there since I saw a racking pain cast on me to line of sight it. Using the stairs, I can't hit her, but she can hit me. It's not fair. Game is rigged. So don't bother trying it in yours. You can't line of sight the racking pain. You can feign death it, but if you do feign death it, it just goes on someone else. So like right here, I feign death it because we have a warlock in our group, and warlocks are immune to death. They simply cannot die if they're played correctly. They're super tanky, and it's one of the reasons they're so good. So right here, this is bad. You can see the way we're moving, the warlock is ahead of us. And so when the spiders fixate, you can see it's just a full wall of them coming across the room, and it gets a little bit rough. But thankfully, there's enough room for us to still squeak by. But if the warlock was ahead of us for like 2 fixates, it would have just been a full wall of spiders, and it would have been game over on that one. The reason the warlock was ahead of us there, it wasn't that he was playing poorly. It was we swapped our kite direction there, and as a caster, you know, he can't just freely run around in circles, jumping and spinning, doing his rotation like BM hunters. But it is something to look out for. There are times that you have to prioritize survival of the group over damage. And so right here, you can see my cooldowns are off cooldown. I'm not using them on cooldown because I want to use them right before these come out so that I get the free cleave. I thought I had hit it. I actually have it macroed into my Witherbark branch. So when those orbs came out, that's when I thought that I hit cooldowns. Ideally, I would have hit them a little earlier than I did right there. But that's still the thought process going into that is I only get one more use of my cooldowns during this boss. And so I might as well use them when it's most optimal, which is when those ads are out for the free cleave and just to make the dungeon a little bit cleaner. We actually practiced on a 26 Atal before going into this 27 since we had both. And we failed the 26 on this boss because we just weren't able to survive, which is kind of hilarious. We were thinking for like 10 minutes before doing this dungeon, like, okay, how are we going to rotate cooldowns? You know, what are we going to do for racking pain overlaps? And like, do we take the talents that give you like the worst wall for Hunter? It's on a shorter cooldown because maybe like every third cast it'll line up and it'll be better overall. And we were thinking about it and we were like, okay, none of this really makes sense. Let's just play better is what it boiled down to. And it worked out. And you can see overall damage pretty good. Atal'Dazar isn't a very patty dungeon, so overall damage is always going to be lower. It's not like Everbloom where it's like, okay, if you're doing well, you're doing 400k DPS. But yeah, that's the first 27 that I've done this season, and it was pretty clean, and there are hopefully going to be more of them coming. So again, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you learned something. I hope that this was helpful, not just for this dungeon, but also just general thought processes for Mythic Plus when it comes to like visual and audio clutter from WeakAuras and add-ons, just things to be thinking about, because it's not always about optimizing your gameplay through directly changing your gameplay. It, in many cases, is about optimizing your gameplay because you can only, how to say this best, you can only improve as a player so much, and obviously everyone can get better, but those returns start to diminish as you get better and better and better and better, right? Like when you know nothing about your rotation, obviously that's the first step, is understand how to do damage. But once you've been doing it for long enough and learning and going out of your way to get better, you know, spending that first hour learning about your rotation is going to give you huge returns, just massive returns, right? But if you've already been playing the spec for months and you've got the priority list down in your head, putting another hour into thinking about your rotation isn't really going to do much as far as improving your gameplay. And so that's when you can start to look at other things when it comes to improving either your gameplay or the results of your gameplay. So you can think about pathing, like your routing in the dungeon. You can think about different strategies instead, things like that. So hopefully I gave some insight throughout the dungeon. This one was mostly talking about visual clutter when it comes to add-ons, which is super important. And at this point, I'm just rambling. So I'm going to go ahead and close this video out. Thank you guys so much for watching. There will be more. So if this is the kind of content that you like, please do like, subscribe, and turn notifications on, and you'll see the next one when it comes out.